Hey everybody, if you're watching this, then congratulations, my internet might actually be existent again. Basically, I realized that with the window of when my new ISP is getting installed today, I would have, at best, about 4 hours between my internet going up and when you would normally get a video today. Which, though today is usually when A Witch in the Woods would go out, because the it's every other like video update. 4 hours to hop on a server, film a thing, edit it, render it, upload it is just not possible. Basically, I would need like a team of people editing alone, and probably an even better connection than I may currently have. We don't know. You'll find out probably if I start raging and or like expressing adoration on Twitter. So yeah, I thought I would just take a moment, and probably quite a long moment because I can yammer on quite a bit, to just sort of sit here and talk to you about a particularly complex subject which I happen to be quite invested in. Disclaimer, I am not even remotely an expert on this. I do not have every source. I do not have, like, perfect knowledge of this. If it interests you, then I very much, like, support you going and checking it out for yourself. Look at the information, check out all the data. There's a whole ton of websites about this whole subject. There's a whole bunch of literature and a whole bunch of fiction and all sorts, and it's wonderful. 1 second there past me. Probably should mention, this episode is going to be about the odd 20 minutes long, and it is going to involve me talking about a lot of stuff, and it's just going to be me sat here all the time. So if you want, and I know a lot of people do this anyways, feel free to just let this video run in the background. You can listen to it almost podcast style, but for those of you that do actually stick around to watch the video, there's a lot of annotations and whatnot that I put on the screen so that people can understand things a bit better. This includes references to some material that I mentioned. So if you want to watch this as a podcast, go ahead. It's fine. I don't mind if you don't watch the footage. But if you actually want to if you actually want to understand a bit more of this, then it's good to continue watching because I have made it actually worthwhile to do so. But there isn't any music and there isn't any like video games going on here. So fair warning, letting you know that. Back to me from the past. But what we're going to be talking about is, broadly speaking, the concept of cyberization, the concept of transcendence and all sorts, and just where humans and machines just sort of start to mesh together perfectly. So I'll be following along the concepts of chaining, and the first question then is, why exactly do we need to change? What exactly is so wrong about us right now that it is actually worthwhile as to investigate melding with machines and all sorts? Why does the human body need to be changed? How does our society need to change? That kind of thing. And yeah, the answer to that is largely faulty evolution. Evolution is, for what it has produced, still in godliness and all that, is really inefficient. It takes the easiest solution at every stage, and it only takes the easiest solution that is presently available, and it has no hindsight. It doesn't revise itself. There's a few exceptions. There's mostly when organisms reach a point where they can start streamlining, becoming more efficient. But even then, there are limits to what evolution can do before it just kills off an entire species. It's also extremely slow, so that tends to cause problems as well. So the examples that we can have here for faulty evolution, the one that I know of most prominently is the recurrent laryngeal nerve. It shares qualities with vas deferens as well. And the laryngeal nerve bridges about an inch or so in your brain, except that it originally, in like a small fish, ages ago, bridged the same distance, just sort of like going near the heart. And over time, our heart has gotten further away from our brain, and the nerve has stayed looped around it. So the laryngeal nerve that crosses basically a couple of inches in your brain goes all the way down your neck and around your heart, and then back up. It's really inefficient. The vas deferens has a similar issue in humans. It loops around another portion of the male genitalia, male genitalia anatomy, and then goes all the way down. And this is due to the testes descending as humans have evolved, most likely due to temperature reasons. There's another issue that people are very well versed with. This is the appendix, which gets inflamed with appendicitis and then explodes filling your system internally with poison, basically, and it doesn't seem to serve any function. Granted, we don't know exactly what this thing was used for. It may well have been involved with when we were more of a vegetarian kind of species, when we were more herbivorous. Doesn't seem to serve much purpose now. We get along perfectly fine without it, but it's still there and it's still a liability from our faulty evolution. And then there's just straight up things which no engineer in their right mind would do, things like the esophagus. Because for some reason, combining something that you breathe with and something that you, like, ingest food with is a really smart idea, according to evolution. So we have this litany of error, this comedy of errors, really, in our physiology that suggests we really need to make some changes here, because we've got some severe problems that cause issues on a daily basis. So the medicine is basically just a massive long list of us trying to find out how exactly we're going to fix these problems. For example, appendectomy, to remove the appendix, the Heimlich maneuver, to help people who are choking presently due to the esophagus design, and I don't know of anything that comes up with the laryngeal nerve and the vas deferens, but it's probably there, I'm sure. But cyberization is, personally at least, my favourite answer to it, and what cyberization is that it is the replacement or augmentation of internal biological structures with mechanical systems. So there's a very, very famous case where one heart patient's entire heart was replaced with a pair of turbines, and they're perfectly fine even today. In fact, one very curious and mildly entertaining side effect of that is that they don't have a pulse, but they're still walking around just fine. I don't quite know why that hasn't become a more popular thing, but I'm not an expert in that particular field. But that is a perfect example of making things more efficient. Now, there's a lot of inefficiency in our system. Our primary, system, for example, is our lungs. It's getting oxygen into our bloodstream so that the rest of our cells can actually have their rocket fuel, molecularly speaking. And our lungs are pressure-based, but we could do so much more. We do, way better things in, a lab on a daily basis. You see better processes going on in Starbucks, for crying out loud. We are better at this than nature has managed to be. The human male organ, for example, is nature's extremely poor attempt at making a water pistol. It's we have much more efficient ways of doing what nature has mildly accomplished. And this also has the side effect that if something goes wrong in your car, say a cog or a belt snaps, we can pull it out, put it back, put a new one back in, and the car runs again perfectly well. If we are exchanging our physiological systems for mechanical augmentations, for mechanical replacements, then we can replace our organs much more easily. Not every machine that we can put into our body requires a blood supply, for example. Not everything needs a nerve. It's a lot easier to replace things in the human body if they are mechanical than if they are biological. A second pacemaker, for example, is fairly easy to fit in. You don't have much issue there of getting to it. And once you've gone to the stage where things are machine inside of you, when you have, for example, a pacemaker that's sensitive and able to have sensors inside of it to read what your heart is doing and such, we get into the situation where we have greater connectivity, which is a huge deal, at least in this modern age, with the internet going everywhere. So, for example, if you had, say, a smartwatch, as a few people do these days, it's not too strange a thing, and a pacemaker, then you could see on your on your smartwatch what is happening according to your pacemaker. So your pacemaker might detect that there is about to be some kind of significant trouble with your heart, and it would alert you by your smartwatch to say, hey, you're about to be in a lot of trouble, go call, an ambulance. Kind of an advantage there. Bit of an important kind of idea. And once you start to do this in a non-strictly medical sense, once it starts to be more voluntary rather than mandatory, a mandatory example of cyberization being modern prosthetics, basically, then you can start to become a lot more versatile. We presently use our hands, for example, to type on keyboards and move mice, but if we could hijack the electrical signals that I'm using to move my fingers right now. My fingers, by the way, are puppets being manipulated by my forearms. Fun little fact there. I love that one. then we could create much more efficient, much faster kind of user inputs than me having to move my hands around all the time, me having to flex my fingers all the time, and getting things like carpal tunnel syndrome, which I don't have, thankfully, but heck knows why not. And once we get to this stage where we can start to control non-human analogous kind of equipment, we basically hit human 2.0. We hit this point where we no longer resemble our current human species silhouette, but we're doing a heck of a lot more. We're seeing the internet through our optic nerve. We are smelling like dangerous chemicals that even dogs have trouble with. We're doing a whole lot more than we presently can as purely organic objects. Which then leads us to the question of exactly what does it mean to change? Like, what exactly is the difference between human and human 2.0? This notion of transhumanism. And it gets kind of blurry. So we start off with the slight problem of exactly how do we classify a cyborg? Is it just a human whose body is augmented by technology? Well, in that case, we're already cyborgs. I mentioned briefly there the issue of mandatory prosthesis for people who, for example, have lost arms in service, or people who have lost legs due to accidents and a variety of other situations. People with pacemakers can also be defined as cyborgs as well. People with hearing aids. We have cyborgs amongst us in civilization by like the most commonplace, briefest of ideas. But we also have our extended perception. So, for example, around me right now, I have 2 monitors. I have a phone. I have a set of laptops. I have a whole ton of stuff, which is connecting me directly to basically the world. I have a much more accurate sense of time than I could have without any of this technology. I'm able to communicate in ways that would be completely out of my purview without it. I'm able to access a great sum of information that is way more than I can contain in my head at any given time. So under that kind of circumstance, I am already augmented with technology. I am already a cyborg. My cognition is extended through these machines so that it can reach you on the other side of a monitor miles away, kilometers, absolute ages away. And that then also leads into this question of, okay, well, what exactly is a human then? Is a human already a cyborg, going way back to the primordial? Was the first human who made a flint tool also a cyborg? Were they, strictly speaking, human before that? And there's a concept that's thrown around inside of Ghost in the Shell, which is an anime series, a manga series, and a movie series that you should definitely check out because it's really fun. It has a bit of a the viewers are geniuses kind of thing to it, but it's really fun. And that is the notion of an external memory device. In the context of Ghost in the Shell, people have these things called cyber brains, which are basically their brains can hook into technology and the internet wirelessly and such. And an external memory device is basically a hard drive. It's this little packaged drive full of data that you can just access and disconnect from at will. No meaningful issue there. But in the second season of Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex, the anime series, there is an episode where we find out that this definition is a much more broad issue than just being a hard drive full of data. We see this kind of storage kind of area, this big housing place, where there are all of these much more traditional items, so things like hair ties, things like torches, that kind of thing. And it's all of these things that aren't, strictly speaking, hard drives. They don't contain any data by themselves, but they have value, they have meaning, they have data, they have information that is only really meaningfully accessible by the person who owns it. Essentially, it is encrypted data. And this happens in the modern realm. If you can forget absolutely everything about your childhood, for example. Like, you don't generally think about the age when you were, like, what you were doing when you were, like, 11. But if you find a small teddy bear from that time, it's got, like, a little wonky eye, and he's got a little bandana around one leg, you immediately remember where those pieces came from. You immediately access that information. So this notion of an external memory device extends not just into the cyborg kind of realm, but also into the human level. We are already accessing external memories. Which then leads us to the conclusion of, okay, so humans originally didn't have this extended kind of cognition, but we had it from the very first flint tool, the very first fireplace, the very first camp. So we are not just the sum of ourselves, as Buddhism and minimalism and all sorts of other material object eschewing philosophical positions would have it. We are also the sum of ourselves and our associated technologies and items. A human deprived of their possessions is in effect not complete. They are effectively like incomplete. They're not quite whole. And this then goes on to the concept of the transcendent man, which is that human beings are always trying to improve their capacity to survive. So early on we made food, which is why our digestive system now is a lot worse at handling raw foods, among other things. And we have made all of these technological strides. We built planes to go across the oceans, even though we already had boats. We built boats to go across the oceans, even when we already had horses and carts to take us where we wanted on our own land. And we have just continually spread, and we've continually advanced our technology. It's been punctuated. Usually times of warfare tend to make technology advance a lot faster. But generally speaking, man as a concept is always striving to change. Now this is somewhat countered by Adrian Thompson, who studies in Essex, England, and his evolved circuits. Now, if you don't know, and it's interesting to look this up, but Adrian Thompson, I will try to put a link to the description about this one, wanted to try and run a genetic algorithm to evolve circuit designs using a programmable kind of circuit matrix of about 100 things. And after a while, he managed to get them to recognize a task pretty very efficiently. But when he looked at it, he couldn't work out how, and it actually eventually developed that there were some seemingly worthless parts of the designs that this evolution process had put together, that if he pulled it out, it broke the thing, because it was actually working on the hardware of the programmable circuit. If he put the code onto a different one, it didn't work. If he changed the slightest seemingly inconsequential part of it, it broke. So that leads us to the question of, okay, we are the sum of ourselves and our extended kind of cognition, but we are also our hardware. Our memories and such are not only the chemical electrical data stored inside of our neurons, but it's also the qualities, the molecular makeup of those neurons as well, which would seem to suggest that we can't change quite as much. It would seem to suggest that we as entities exist not only within the data that we are storing, but also within the hardware that we are storing it, meaning that cyberization would be a very negative idea, because we would change who we are on a fundamental level. And that's a fair criticism, that's a fair concern, but I honestly, personally would say we've changed so much. You are a different person within the last hour than you were, like, an hour before that. Every moment of every piece of data is always changing us. Our cells are replacing, and our brains as well are changing over time as well. So it's a fair criticism to say that we are the things that we are storing as well as what we are made of, but also what we are made of and what we are storing changes on a constant basis. It's not as drastic as just take out one neuron and I'm a whole different person. So this finally culminates. We've gone through faulty evolution, cyberization, to transhumanism. Now we hit the singularity. Now, for those of you who aren't informed on this, the singularity is a hypothetical point wherein the bridge between man and machine is essentially completely erased due to what's called hard AI, which is artificial intelligence programs way ahead of Yogg-Dwarfs, which are able to review their own programming and then write smarter versions of themselves. This creates a sort of endlessly repeating infinite cycle where you get... I won't say that it would be a god, but compared to our modern intellect, that's more or less how we would perceive it. So the hard AI becomes increasingly more intelligent, it creates increasingly more advanced technology, more increasingly far-reaching leaps in understanding and such, to the point where we just sort of meld with it, to the point that exactly what is man and what is machine becomes unknowable. Now, it's important at this stage to remember that we are robots, or androids, or gynoids, depending on how exactly you want to use the term, but we are machines. We are biomechanical machines, but we are machines nonetheless. I am inhaling oxygen because oxygen is my fuel, along with ATP and sugars and caffeines and all sorts. And that is running my main systems, creating an electrical charge, which I am able to shoot out of my hypothalamus into my neural network. I am a machine already. So the difference between the computer that I'm presently working on here and myself is that we are simply a different brand, if you will. But we build robots and computers and all sorts in much the same way one might consider as the way that extremely early forms of life created their children, created their first offspring, the first replicating cells. We're not making things that are identical to us, but no parent ever does. No parent ever has. So once we hit the singularity, and there are some estimates it could happen within the next 60 years, I personally don't like to hedge my bets. What happens is, again, it's not going to be a flowery kind of thing. We won't be gods. We won't necessarily even be definable as human anymore, at least not to us. We'll hit the Arthur C. Clarke principle of any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. A caveman would personally consider that we ourselves are godlike because we can speak to men through the sky on the other side of the planet. We can step off of the planet and fall forever in space, both, for example, the International Space Station. But think again, like that same leap, we will not be able to comprehend the slightest thing of what is happening with the post-singularity humans, and we probably won't be able to recognize them as such at all. But they will still be human. They will just be more human. To be more human is to be transcendent, to attempt to exceed yourself. And I have no idea how many of you I have lost, but oh wow. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that, like, 20-minute diatribe. This is a subject that, again, I'm not an expert on, but I do a fair bit of reading, so yeah, I get a few things in my head. I can talk about a few more subjects like this, so let me know in the comments if you'd like to see me ramble and yammer on for 20 minutes odd on other subjects. And hopefully this was somewhat comparable to having a Witch in the Woods episode out today. Hopefully it will return on Saturday, assuming that my internet is working by now. I don't know, because I'm recording this in the past. That's another thing that I can do. I can talk to the future through time. It's fun to remember exactly what we can do today and what we might be able to do tomorrow. But yeah, take a look at that subject, some other subjects I've mentioned, take a look at some of the notions I've discussed, that kind of thing, and I shall catch you all next time.